Welcome to TechTarget News Bytes. If you're one of the many organizations that has Microsoft Exchange Server in their environments, then you may have heard about some of the proxy vulnerabilities affecting the widely used email software, but you might not know the details. So what are ProxyLogon, ProxyShell, and ProxyToken, and why are all these proxy flaws in the headlines? There's a lot to keep up with here, so let's turn the clock back a bit and start at the beginning. In December of 2020, a security researcher at DevCore, an InfoSec consultancy in Taiwan, discovered a critical authentication bypass vulnerability in the on-premise version of Exchange Server. This vulnerability is known as ProxyLogon. The researcher, who goes by the name Orange Sai, also discovered a post-authentication arbitrary file write bug that, when chained with ProxyLogon, created a remote code execution exploit. The vulnerabilities and proof of concept exploit were reported to Microsoft, but just before that occurred, threat actors began exploiting the 0 days in the wild. Microsoft later attributed the pre-disclosure attacks to a Chinese nation-state threat group known as Hafnium. But the exploitation didn't stop with Hafnium. Other threat actors began exploiting the flaws in February, just prior to Microsoft's disclosure of the bugs and the Patch Tuesday updates that fixed them. Microsoft and DevCore both conducted investigations, but found no evidence that a leak or theft of the vulnerability info, or POCs, had occurred. Despite the considerable coverage of ProxyLogon because of the apparent vulnerability leak and the nation-state attacks on 0-day vulnerabilities, many organizations did not patch. A week after Microsoft disclosed and patched the flaws, there were still around 80,000 Exchange servers that were unpatched. And while that number went down during the spring and summer months, there are still several thousand servers today that have not been updated. I know that's a lot to keep up with, but wait, there's more. Last month, Orange Sai delivered presentations at both Black Hat and DEF CON, where he provided additional technical details and background about ProxyLogon. The presentation, aptly named ProxyLogon as the tip of the iceberg, discussed other vulnerabilities in Exchange Server, including a remote code execution flaw called ProxyShell. On the bright side, ProxyShell had already been reported to Microsoft and patched a few months earlier, along with 2 other companion vulnerabilities. However, after Black Hat and DEF CON, 2 other security researchers used Orange Sai's presentation to reverse engineer a working POC for ProxyShell, which they published to the internet. And soon after that, ProxyShell attacks began. And just like with ProxyLogon, many Exchange servers were unpatched and vulnerable to ProxyShell attacks. And there's more. Less than 2 weeks ago, another Exchange server bug was discovered, this time by a security researcher with the Vietnamese telecom company VNPT. The bug, known as ProxyToken, is another authentication bypass vulnerability that could allow threat actors to perform configuration actions on mailboxes. Microsoft patched the flaw in July, and so far no widespread exploitation has been observed. But around Labor Day weekend, several threat researchers and vendors reported a ramp-up in exploitation activity of ProxyShell, including attacks from the Conti ransomware gang. As such, many organizations, including Microsoft and CISA, have issued advisories and are urging enterprises to patch immediately. So that's a lot of proxies and info to keep up with, but the good news is, if you're up to date on your security patches, then you're in pretty good shape. But depending on when you applied those updates, you may want to review your logs and look for any suspicious activity in your environment. I'm Rob Wright, Security News Director at TechTarget, and thanks for watching.